Chapter 5. What the hell happened to my place? A dynamic young woman stood in front of her personal tragedy. Letitia stood in front of the rubble that used to be her restaurant. At least a quarter of the top floor had fallen through to the ground. Her beautiful sculpted frontage had caved in, and struts of metal were sticking out, making an already ruined building look unwelcome. That hurt the most. Letitia had strived to make her little place one of the most relaxing, enticing establishments in the city. The hanging flowers were always in season, the decor shifted to match said seasons, and local bands and learning musicians rotated to keep things fresh. She planned revamps and new looks years in advance, and hired some particularly handy gentlemen to bring her dreams to fruition. She loved this place. Every brick was a testament to her struggles, every obstacle she'd smashed through, and every enemy she'd left wallowing in their dismay. She'd made good, long-lasting friends and extended family she'd pieced together, and filled her heart. Critics had often remarked about the love they felt in the food. The waiters seemed happy. The chef seemed exhausted when they left. More often than not, they were in good moods when approached by reporters, or caught slipping a little juice in the back alleys. You'd think she'd be in tears after realizing how much this place meant to her, but there were work to be done. She walked past a body-length piece of glass. Eyeing herself up, she was pleased with how she looked. 32 had probably been her personal peak on reflection. It wasn't solely a looks thing, but what she had learned up to that point, and her self-confidence and fire had been at its best. Her face had been at its cutest, but her eyes suggested just enough naughtiness to scare the naive, but interest the chances. Her figure at its curvy, but also its strongest. She was still playing netball though, so it was more coaching by that point. Her back was delightfully straight, and the bending hadn't happened yet, though she wasn't sure if she had been down to the accident or just poor genetics. Thankfully, those bunions hadn't come through till much later. She couldn't be dealing with that nonsense all over again. Letitia ran her hands through her hair. It'd been a while since she'd been able to twist the hair with this amount of confidence, but it was strong again and so full. She scrunched her hair. It felt nice. She giggled. It felt like moments till Christmas. As a child again. She was filled with so much life. Letitia walked around tapping various walls to assess damage done to her place. Thankfully, she couldn't smell gas, and that was her primary concern, as fire would destroy important documents and her special recipes. She shook with amusement when she remembered that time a young Ainsley Harriet had got caught trying to read over her shoulder. He got onion duty for a month. That boy had drive. She was so proud to see him on TV, and that he didn't use any of her recipes and tried to pass them off as his own. There was a lot of homage in the business and plenty of borrowing, but outright theft was not uncommon, sadly. She was glad she was right about that boy. Satisfied with her survey, she surmised that if she kept the vibrations to a minimum, she could investigate inside without making anything else fall over. Loosening her clothes, she slowly closed her eyes, and when she opened them, she was 6 years old. Clambering between the holes in the rubble, she easily fit into the back part of the restaurant. 16 years. She lightly stepped around the intact kitchen and headed further back. It seemed for the most part that the electrics were out and only the shop frontage and serving areas were damaged because of the earthquake. The office was practically untouched. Yes, a few frames had fallen off the walls, but she didn't mind that. Her mother's ashes were in a metal-sealed urn, thankfully, so she was safe. Her favourite photo of her Pigapie Dudley was safe too. She missed that silly little dog. She was too old for another Frenchie now. She laughed. She was too old. That was no longer the case. Though, where the hell you get a Frenchie during all this mess? 6 years old. Outside. 28 years old. It took some effort, but she managed to heft a huge slab of concrete. After about an hour of work, she felt slightly tired. So 28 years and 1 hour ago. Fully refreshed, she continued with her work, stopping occasionally to reset her clock. She worked for around 4 hours solid, clearing most of the debris. Grabbing a broom, she swept up most of the dust and took another look at her place. Till she could effect repairs, she needed some way to lock the kitchen, as it was the only point of ingress into the main body of the back, so it needed secured. Considering there were no police around and hardly anybody any people about. It was down to her to protect what was hers. Her knives. Quite possibly her favourite possessions. She tore into her kitchen and played her puzzle cabinet till she heard a soft click. She took out a hairpin and delicately pushed it into the subtle hole at the side of the cabinet. There was a much louder click and the cabinet opened. Jet black blades gleamed against violet velvet. She picked one up, and as she span it in the air, it sung like a bird's song. These blades were always a delight to handle, but she wasn't surprised they felt more so now, as everything had changed after the white eclipse. The last week or so had been odd. There had been a general tension in the air that made outside feel damp and uncomfortable to be in. Fights had broken out over the silliest of things, and animals were apprehensive. There was a rat exodus that was the focus of many news outlets, but many remarked on the birds that simply fell from the sky exhausted because they refused to land. Strays and feral pets and foxes feasted on these tired birds, and maggots and flies gorged on the remains. Then there were the dreams. Many people had vivid, vibrant dreams depicting an apocalyptic end of chaos and people vying for power in the aftermath. Letitia's dreams were nothing like that. She walked alone across the globe, and she observed the rise and fall of man and its many replacements. She was a person, property, slave, equal, exemplar, queen, god, legend, spectre, as civilizations rose and fell. When she woke and eventually came into her power, she understood what her power could mean. She just hadn't decided what she might do. It was hard as if the time was going to be a factor. She went back outside, her knives in a custom holster that the blade maker had made specifically for her. She cheekily wiggled, wondering whether Jingan might be interested in this. Catching herself in a pane of glass, she realized that she looked absolutely stunning. Time hadn't been terrible to her, but this was her prime, and she felt like sunlight. She was so pleased with herself that she did not Rakesh land 15 feet behind her. To be fair, he didn't make a single sound till he spoke. "Who the fuck are you?" he spat. Then, eyes widening, "Where the hell did you get those knives?" Letitia looked over her shoulder while stretching casually. It looked like Rakesh, only he'd put on some weight since she'd last seen him last. Never seen him with long hair and a beard before. It looked good in him, gave him almost regal countenance. That was definitely the jacket she had bought many years ago, but there was something else about him that seemed different. She looked him dead in the eyes and said, "Rakesh?" His eyes. The moment she said his name, she could see the recognition, and the shock revealed the old Rakesh. The eyes before they were actually hard. Imagined the dreamer that Rakesh actually grew up. She was a little saddened though. Something violent and miserable had happened, as that wasn't a change that a stubbed toe would cause. "How do you know my name?" he spluttered. "The same way you know mine." She walked towards him, hands on hips. She stopped, just short, glaring hard. "Letitia?" Rakesh stepped forward and sniffed her. She wasn't quite prepared and flinched. "Hey!" Rakesh grabbed her arms and sniffed her repeatedly. He let her go after he was satisfied. "How are you like this?" He was stunned. "You look so different." Letitia treated him to several versions of herself in quick succession. While stood there stunned, she threw her arms around him and hugged him hard. "I want to say magic? Show me what you can do." Rakesh grabbed her and took her for a circuit of the block in moments. Letitia laughed heartily as her heart was pounding so hard, but she loved the speed. "That was absolutely amazing. Want me to fix you up some food?" Rakesh grinned. Giddy with excitement, she kissed him on the cheek and then ran ahead to the kitchen. Rakesh smiled with relief, then followed after. In a building about 40 feet away, an older gent with long, spiky hair watched with interest. Muscular arms scooped up wherever he could find, and as he filled his rucksack with scrap metal, he nodded. In turn, he was watched by an even older gentleman who had a small child in tow. The little girl reached up and tugged on the gent's suit jacket. "Wheatie," she demanded. After receiving a look, she added, "Peas." then sat happily chewing the grandad candy.